When Jessica and Mark Thompson left the chaos of Los Angeles for the quiet town of Eldridge, Pennsylvania, they believed they were trading noise for peace, stress for serenity. Eldridge was the kind of place that didn't show up on most maps, a small, forest-wrapped town with colonial charm and just under 3,000 residents. It was perfect for starting over, especially after the miscarriage, the therapy, and the silence that had taken over their once happy apartment. Their new home stood at the edge of a cul-de-sac, nestled between towering pine trees. The real estate agent called it an overlooked gem, a pre-Civil War house with original floorboards, antique fixtures, and a basement full of character. The price was unbelievably low, even for a fixer-upper. That should have been a warning. On the first night, as they unpacked boxes and sipped wine on the creaky porch, Mark laughed about how horror movies always start with cheap houses in weird towns. Jessica smiled, but her eyes were locked on the tree line. Something about the way the forest leaned toward the house made her uneasy, as if the pines were listening. That night, it rained hard. The storm pounded the roof like fists, and thunder rolled close enough to rattle the old window panes. At around 2:17 a.m., Jessica woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate pacing, just above their bedroom ceiling. She froze. The attic. It was supposed to be empty. "Mark," she whispered, nudging him awake. "Do you hear that?" He groaned, still half asleep. "It's the wind." But she knew the sound of footsteps. She'd heard enough in their LA apartment from the neighbors above. These weren't creaks from shifting wood. These were measured steps, back and forth, then a pause as if whoever it was had stopped right above their bed. Jessica didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, Mark climbed into the attic with a flashlight. Dust, cobwebs, a few old trunks, nothing else. "I told you, babe, it's just an old house. They creak, they settle." But that night at exactly 2:17 a.m., the footsteps returned. Jessica began counting the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. The slow pacing above their bedroom started again. Right on time, 2:17 a.m. Her hands gripped the edge of the blanket, sweat forming at her temples, despite the chill in the room. The footsteps would stop just above the bed, linger for a moment, and then reverse direction. Mark had fallen asleep again, his soft snores oblivious to the unnatural rhythm overhead. She didn't wake him this time. She just lay there listening. 5 nights in a row now, same hour, same steps. By the 6th night, Jessica was sitting up, phone in hand, recording. She pressed record at exactly 2:16 a.m. and waited. At 2:17, like clockwork, the footsteps began. When she played the recording back the next morning, her stomach sank. Nothing. No steps. No creaks. Just silence, broken by her own shaky breathing. She played it again. Nothing. She was starting to feel crazy. Later that day, she went to the Eldridge Public Library, a modest stone building run by a woman named Martha, who looked like she'd been there for a century. Jessica asked about the house, its history, past owners, anything unusual. Martha's face shifted when she heard the address. "Oh, that old place," she said. "Used to belong to the Winslows. Vanished in the 50s. No trace. People say it's cursed." Jessica blinked. "Vanished?" "Mm-hmm. Husband, wife, 2 children. Never found. House was abandoned for nearly 40 years. Locals avoided it. You're the first to move in since the Evans family in '99? Jessica leaned in. "What happened to them?" "They left in the middle of the night. Didn't even take their car. Just gone." That night, Jessica didn't sleep. She sat in the living room with every light on, staring at the ceiling, waiting. At 2:17 a.m., the footsteps didn't come from the attic. They came from the basement. The basement door was at the far end of the kitchen, tucked between an old broom closet and the walk-in pantry. Jessica had never noticed it creak so loudly before, but that night the sound echoed like a scream through the house as she cracked it open. The footsteps had been slow, deliberate, as if someone was descending the stairs on the other side. One step, then another, then silence. She stared into the darkness below. The basement light didn't work. The bulb had burst on their second day. Mark promised to replace it, but hadn't yet. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, flicked it on, and aimed it down the stairs. Wooden steps, crumbling in places. Damp air. Mold. She took one cautious step down. Kriak. Hello? She whispered. Silence. Another step, then another, until she reached the bottom. Her light swept across the basement. Old shelves, rusted tools, a broken washing machine, and a door she hadn't seen before. It was built into the brick wall, iron-framed, with no visible handle, just a keyhole. Jessica felt a shiver crawl up her back. She stepped closer. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed behind her. The basement door had slammed shut. She spun around, heart pounding. Mark! No answer. She sprinted up the steps and yanked at the door. Locked. She twisted the knob until her fingers hurt. Still locked. Mark! She screamed. Open the door! Footsteps echoed above. Not hurried ones, not his. Just slow, dragging steps across the kitchen floor. Then they stopped directly above the basement door. She held her breath. The light flickered. The air grew cold. Then the knob turned slowly, unlocking with a soft click. Jessica threw the door open and stumbled out. The kitchen was empty. No sign of Mark. She ran to the bedroom. He was still asleep, snoring quietly, undisturbed. When she shook him awake, he looked at her groggily. What's wrong? The basement. Someone locked me in. He blinked. What were you doing down there? I heard footsteps. Mark sat up, rubbing his face. Jess, I told you, it's this house. It makes noises. You're just... No, she interrupted, voice sharp. There's something down there. And there's a door, one I've never seen before. That made him pause. What kind of door? One that shouldn't be there. Mark insisted on seeing the basement for himself the next morning. Daylight softened the menace in the house, and Jessica almost questioned herself until they reached the bottom of the stairs. There, she pointed. That door. You see it now, right? Mark frowned. Yeah, that definitely wasn't on the inspection report. He knelt and examined the frame. No handle, just a keyhole. Weird. Jessica stood behind him, arms folded tightly. You believe me now? He didn't answer directly. We can ask the realtor if they know anything. Probably just an old coal chute or something. That afternoon, they called Mr. Donnelly, the real estate agent. I've sold 3 houses on this street, he said, but never had anyone mention a basement door. The Winslow place always had, let's just say it was a hard sell. Old houses are full of surprises. Jessica didn't like that answer. That night, while Mark scrolled through his phone, she went back to the basement alone. She brought a magnet just to test the idea, but the keyhole wasn't magnetic. She pressed her ear to the door. Nothing. Just as she turned to go, something glinted on the dusty floor near the shelves. A key. Long, old-fashioned, made of blackened iron. She hadn't seen it before. It was too perfectly placed, too clean. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. The weight of it felt wrong, as if it vibrated faintly, like a distant hum. Her thumb brushed against a symbol etched into the top, a circle with a vertical slash through it. She took the key upstairs, locked it in her jewelry box, and said nothing to Mark. But that night she dreamt of the door. In her dream, the door opened slowly, creaking wider and wider until darkness poured out like liquid. From that black void, voices whispered not words, but fragmented sounds, weeping, growling, a child laughing, and something crawling. She woke up drenched in sweat. The key was on her nightstand. She hadn't put it there. Jessica stared at the key on her nightstand for a long time. She hadn't moved it. She knew she hadn't. The jewelry box was still locked. The key had moved on its own. Mark had already left for work, so she was alone in the house. Every room felt colder that morning. The floorboards groaned differently, like they were reacting to her thoughts, not her footsteps. Even the light filtering through the windows looked faded. She told herself she would throw the key away. But instead, she found herself in the basement again, standing in front of the iron frame door. Her fingers clenched the key so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Just look through the keyhole," a voice in her mind whispered. She knelt. The keyhole was wide enough for one eye. At first, all she saw was pitch black. Then a flicker movement, like something shifted in the dark, something massive and slow. Then a sound. Not a voice, not quite. More like a whisper crawling inside her head. "Jessica!" She gasped and fell backward, scrambling up the steps. The whisper had known her name. It had spoken it. She locked the basement door and ran into the backyard, breath short, heart pounding. That night, Mark found her still shaken. She told him everything. The whisper, the movement, the key. She expected him to laugh or get angry, but instead he just looked tired. "I've been hearing things too," he admitted. "At night, a woman crying. I thought it was a neighbor, but there's no one out there." Jessica's eyes widened. "The voice I heard, it knew me." They sat in silence for a while. Then Jessica stood and went to get the key, but it was gone again. The jewelry box was wide open, the lock snapped clean off. Mark helped her search the whole house, but the key had vanished. Until 2:17 a.m. That night the footsteps returned. But they weren't in the attic or the basement. They were in the hallway, just outside their bedroom door. And this time they didn't stop. The footsteps were soft but purposeful, like bare feet on cold wood. Jessica froze in bed, her eyes locked on the bedroom door. Mark had heard them too this time. His hand instinctively reached for hers under the blanket. Neither of them moved. The footsteps stopped directly outside their door. Then, nothing. Jessica held her breath. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker, like it was being pressed down by something unseen. Mark whispered, "Stay here," and slowly sat up. "Don't," she whispered back, but it was too late. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept from his college days and crept toward the door. He opened it fast, ready to strike. No one was there. The hallway was empty, but the air smelled wrong, like rust and wet stone. The floorboards in front of the door had faint scratches, 3 parallel lines, as if something with claws had dragged itself along the wood. Mark didn't say anything. He just closed the door again and wedged a chair under the handle. They didn't sleep. In the morning, Jessica noticed something else. A thin trail of dark red liquid on the baseboard, almost dried, leading from the bedroom door down the hallway and vanishing right before the stairs to the basement. She called the police. An officer came, walked the house, and found nothing out of place. "Might be old rust," he said, "or plumbing. Houses like this bleed weird things." Jessica stared at him. "Did you say bleed?" He chuckled nervously. "Figure of speech, ma'am." That night, Jessica dreamed again. In the dream, she was walking down the stairs to the basement. The iron door was wide open. From within, a figure stood too tall, too thin. It had no face, only a stretched veil of skin where features should be. But it smiled somehow. The smile was in her head. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. It reached toward her, not with hands, but with shadows. She woke up gasping. Next to her, Mark was gone. The blanket was still warm. She ran through the house calling his name. The front door was locked, the kitchen empty. Then she heard it from the basement, the sound of a key turning. Jessica stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at the basement door. The click of the lock echoed in her ears, followed by the soft groan of old hinges. The door creaked open slowly, as if inviting her in. "Mark!" she called out. No answer. Her hand trembled as she reached for the light switch. Still broken. Just like always, with no other choice, she grabbed the flashlight again and stepped down into the basement, each creaking stair a hammer to her heartbeat. At the bottom, the air was damp and foul, like something had been rotting behind the walls for years. The iron door, the one with the keyhole, was wide open. Beyond it was a tunnel. Not stone, not brick, just dirt, packed tight into walls and floor, stretching into blackness. It hadn't been there before. This wasn't some root cellar or secret wine stash. Something had dug it, something alive. "Mark?" she whispered again, stepping inside. The tunnel swallowed the light. The farther she walked, the more the walls pulsed with moisture, and the air grew colder, wetter, almost breathing. Then she saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of her flashlight beam. She called his name louder. A whisper answered her, not Mark's voice. "Jessica." She turned and ran, flashlight bouncing against the walls, heart hammering. She reached the stairs, slammed the iron door shut, and twisted the rusted lock. It held. For now. But Mark was gone. She called the police again. They searched the basement. The tunnel was gone. Just a solid wall of brick behind the iron door. "No signs of forced entry," the officer told her. "Maybe he needed space. You said things were stressful." He left her a card and advised rest. She didn't sleep that night. She just sat on the bed, clutching the flashlight, waiting. At 2:17 a.m., the light flickered. She heard something crawl up from the basement. Not steps, a dragging sound, like claws on concrete, like skin slapping wet stone. And a voice that was almost Mark's but wrong. "Jess, come down." Jessica didn't move. The voice calling her name from the basement was almost Mark's, the pitch, the rhythm, even the familiar groggy tone he had when waking up. But something about it felt strained, like someone trying too hard to mimic human speech. "Jess, it's cold. I need you. Please." She backed away from the basement door. Her hand hovered over her phone, but she knew no one would believe this. Not the police, not her sister, no one. Then the voice changed. It dropped the softness. The human tone vanished. "Come now." 3 knocks echoed from the basement door. Boom, 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 heavy and rhythmic, like the knuckles were made of stone. Jessica ran to her room and locked the door. She pushed the dresser against it and curled on the floor. She didn't sleep, not that night. By morning, everything was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no cars, not even the rustle of wind through the trees outside. She finally dared to check the basement again. The iron door remained sealed. The hallway was clean, no scratches, no blood. But the key had returned. It lay on the kitchen table, polished and cold. And next to it was something worse, Mark's wedding ring. She picked it up with shaking hands. It was still warm. Jessica called the police again, barely coherent. When they arrived, they found no ring, no key. They gently suggested grief counseling. Later that day, she found an old newspaper clipping under the bedroom floorboards like someone had hidden it there decades ago. It was dated March 12, 1957. "Local family vanishes in home, only signs left were scratches and blood." The photo showed the Winslow family, a mother, a father, 2 children, in a house that looked exactly the same, right down to the cracked railing on the porch. The article ended with one line that froze her blood. Witnesses claimed to hear the missing father calling from beneath the floorboards for days after he was last seen. Jessica looked down at the floor. Something tapped 3 times from beneath her feet. Jessica no longer trusted anything in the house, not her eyes, not the sounds, not even time. The clocks had started to behave strangely. They would stop at 2:17 a.m., tick backwards for a moment, then resume. Lights flickered. The fridge door would open by itself. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. And worst of all were the mirrors. It started subtly, a shape in the background that didn't exist in the real room. A flicker of motion behind her when she brushed her teeth. But she told herself she was just tired. Then on the 3rd night without sleep, she saw it. She was in the upstairs bathroom, washing her face. When she looked up, her reflection didn't follow. It stood still, perfectly still while she moved. And it was smiling. Not a twitch at the corners of the mouth, not a natural grin, a slow, wide stretch of lips revealing too many teeth. Sharp, wet. She stumbled back. Her reflection didn't. It cocked its head to one side, Then the eyes darkened, like ink spreading across the whites. Jessica screamed and fled the room. She covered every mirror in the house with blankets and towels. But that night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the bathroom light turned on by itself. She heard the towel slide to the floor, and he whispered from the hall mirror, "You can't cover me, Jessica. I wear your skin." She locked herself in the bedroom, stuffed towels under the door, and turned up music just to drown out the whispering. In the morning, every mirror was bare again, every towel removed. One was folded neatly on her pillow. And written on the glass of the bedroom vanity, in something thick and red, "Let him in." She didn't know if it meant Mark or the thing wearing his voice. She packed a bag and tried to leave, but the front door wouldn't open. Not jammed, not stuck. Gone. In its place was solid wall-old wood, plastered and painted, as if no door had ever existed there. The house had sealed her in. Jessica didn't scream anymore. She was too tired, too drained. The house had taken her voice, her sleep, her trust in anything solid or logical. Now it wanted her mind. She checked every window, boarded shut from the outside, every wall, seamless, no door, no cracks, just blank, decaying paint that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. Then she noticed something strange on the second floor. A hallway that hadn't been there before. It extended past the guest room, longer than the house should allow, far too long for the layout she knew. At the end of the hallway stood a door, old, warped, painted shut with peeling green layers. She stood before it, heart pounding. On the door, carved deep into the wood, was the symbol from the key, the circle with a slash. She didn't remember walking into the room. One moment she was staring at the door, the next, inside. The air smelled like rotting flowers and earth. The room was empty except for a crib in the center. It rocked gently on its own. Jessica's breath caught. She approached it slowly, feeling each footstep like it took hours. Inside the crib was a bundle. Wrapped in moldy linen, something moved beneath. She reached out, hands shaking, and pulled the cloth aside. It wasn't a baby. Well, it had no face. Just skin, stretched, slick, pulsing, as if something inside was breathing. It turned toward her and whispered in Mark's voice, "It's not so bad down here. Come lie beside me." She stumbled back, fell, and crawled out of the room. When she turned to look behind her, the hallway was gone. She was back in her bedroom. The bag she had packed earlier was empty, clothes neatly returned to drawers. The mirror above the vanity was uncovered again. And this time her reflection didn't smile. It screamed. Not in fear, but rage. Jessica's hands were trembling as she stared at the mirror, watching the face on the other side of the glass scream. The rage was palpable, rippling out like waves of heat. Her reflection twisted and contorted as if trying to break free from the confines of the glass. "No," she whispered, but it was too late. The reflection's scream had become a low growl, rumbling from deep within the glass. Then in an instant, it stopped. The face relaxed. It smiled again, but this time it was no longer her smile. It was something else, something twisted, something wrong. The eyes stared through her, into her very soul, with a knowing emptiness. "Come closer," the reflection whispered. "You can't escape me, Jessica. I've been here long before you, and I'll be here long after." Her heart raced. She turned away from the mirror, stumbling backward until she hit the bed. She covered her face, trying to block out the sound of that voice, the voice that was both Mark's and not. The air around her grew thick, oppressive. The walls seemed to close in, and the faint smell of decay and earth filled her nostrils. Every corner of the room felt like it was closing in, bending in on her. And then she heard it. A soft click. The front door, which had been sealed shut for days, slowly creaked open. She couldn't understand. How? Why? The house was supposed to be trapping her in. But there it was, the door wide open, bathed in the dim light of the hallway. Beyond it, the blackness of the outside world beckoned, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness inside the house. "Run," the voice inside her head urged. "Run while you can." With her heart in her throat, Jessica ran. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She bolted for the door, her breath ragged, her legs shaking beneath her. But as she reached the doorway, something cold and unseen grasped her ankle. She fell forward, sprawling onto the floor. The house was pulling her back. She looked up and saw him. Mark. But not Mark. His face was wrong, twisted, hollowed, as if the skin had been stretched too tight. His eyes were black pools, voids that absorbed everything around them. He wasn't smiling. No, he was grinning, a grotesque, empty grin that stretched too far, too wide. "You shouldn't have tried to leave," he hissed. "Now you're mine, forever." The door slammed shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the house like a clap of thunder. Jessica tried to scream, but her voice was gone. She was trapped, forever. And somewhere deep in the house, a clock began to tick. Jessica awoke to the sound of silence. The kind of silence that presses in on you, suffocates you, until you can no longer tell where the air ends and your body begins. She was lying on the cold floor, the same one she had fallen on just moments before, or was it days? Time had lost its meaning here. She sat up slowly, her limbs stiff, her mind foggy. The house was different now. The walls seemed to hum with a low vibration, like a heartbeat. Her reflection in the glass no longer mocked her. It was gone. But something else had replaced it. The hallway stretched before her, longer than it had ever been. No longer familiar, and at the very end, behind an old weathered door, a door she had never seen before, something called her. Jessica stood, her legs shaky but determined. She walked down the hallway, the floor beneath her feet creaking with every step. The air grew colder the closer she got to the door. Her breath hung in the air, visible, as if the temperature had dropped below freezing. When she reached the door, she didn't hesitate. The moment her fingers touched the handle, it turned. And inside was the last room. It was a room she had never entered before. It was like the heart of the house, where all the dark, twisted things lived. The walls were lined with photographs, old, faded images of families, of people who looked familiar but were not quite right. They stared out of the frames, their eyes hollow, empty. The faces were obscured by a darkness that seemed to shift with the flicker of light. In the center of the room was a large wooden chest. The chest was open. Inside there was only darkness. No contents, no substance. Just the inky blackness that seemed to pulse and breathe, alive in its own way. And in that darkness, she heard it, her name. Jessica. She stepped closer, drawn to the voice, to the whisper that was both her own and yet not. The moment she leaned over the chest, she felt it, the cold grip on her soul, pulling her in. She struggled to breathe, her chest tight, her vision blurring. "Come closer," the voice whispered. "The house is yours now. You can stay forever." But then, in a moment of clarity, Jessica realized something. The house had never wanted her. It had wanted something else. It had wanted everything, every soul it could trap, every memory it could erase. She had become part of the house. The door slammed shut behind her, and the darkness inside the chest swallowed her whole.